I'm Rick Harp. This is your APTN News Brief for Thursday, July 10th. We begin in Gatineau, Quebec, where some 3 years ago, the Native Women's Association of Canada opened their brand new headquarters. Now, that very same building is up for sale. Fraser Needham explains.
It was a big grand opening in the early summer of 2022, and APTN News was there for the festivities. At the time, then CEO Lynn Grew said the new office cost about $9 million, but the organization believed it was well worth the investment. The 45,000 square foot facility had 5 floors adorned with Indigenous artwork from all over the world, with a number of cultural spaces, a gift shop, and kitchen. The organization said it would generate its own source revenue by hosting public and private meetings and selling artwork. But 3 years later, an ad on this real estate site says the NWAC building is now up for sale at just under $8 million. APTN reached out to NWAC and was told no one is available for comment. However, in an emailed statement, Chief Operations Officer Bev Dinsdale said the organization is looking to get back to its core mandate of advocacy. She added that another property, the Chelsea Resiliency Lodge, is in need of repair and will soon be listed for sale. The organization has also put out a tender for a community-based organization to manage its Resiliency Lodge in New Brunswick. The most recent audited financial statements on the NWAC website are for 2023. APTN also reached out to the former CEO Lynn Grew, who left the organization in the spring of 2024. In an emailed statement, she said during her time with the organization, NWAC demonstrated strong financial growth and annual surpluses. APTN News asked Indigenous Services if it was investigating NWAC's finances. It replied that the Government of Canada does not get involved in NWAC's internal governance matters and referred all questions back to the organization. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
A First Nations man claims he was recently prevented from boarding a return flight because staff rejected his status card as invalid ID. Sav Jonza reports.
69-year-old Lawrence Douglas Corbier loves to read his Bible. His faith recently brought him to a gathering in Quebec to connect with others through worship. He says it was a great trip until he tried to go home to Winnipeg and couldn't board his plane.
I didn't know what to do. I was getting kind of fearful. I don't know nobody in Montreal, and I was starting to cry almost on the inside.
Corbier tried to board his WestJet flight in Montreal using his Indian status card, a legally acceptable piece of identification for domestic travel, but the attendant wouldn't let him on the plane because she thought it was expired. He says she was looking at the wrong date, but she wouldn't listen to him.
It was getting kind of late. The plane is about ready to take off, so all the others were going through. So that I just put me to the side, and so I stayed there. And then after I was trying to talk to her again, and she was already getting ready to close.
WestJet ended up putting Corbier in a hotel near the airport and booked him a new flight the next evening. But the walking he had to do to get there and back was difficult on his legs due to complications from diabetes.
It was pretty hard for me. I had to stop along the way.
He says there was no longer an issue with his status card when he boarded the following day. He hopes airlines improve their staff's knowledge on acceptable identification and the different needs elders may have.
They need to say, "We're sorry, we pushed you to the side. We could have got you on the plane just by looking at my status card up on top." Was that 2029? They didn't see that. They seen the bottom of it.
In an emailed statement to APTN News, WestJet says they have since apologized to Corbier. They say all of our airport and contact center staff receive training on what forms of ID are acceptable for air travel, which includes the Canadian Certificate of Indian Status. They also say WestJet will be reimbursing any out-of-pocket expenses associated with this travel disruption and offering compensation to Elder Corbier as a gesture of goodwill. Going forward, Corbier says he will stick with Air Canada for all his flying needs. Sav Jonza, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency Chair Tim McLeod has announced some new funds for places affected by fire. Monies to be split among communities based on a provincial needs assessment.
The province is investing an additional $20 million to help communities that were devastated by the wildfires with their cleanup efforts and restoring those communities to a place where they can begin to rebuild.
RCMP in New Brunswick have laid multiple charges against a Kings Clear First Nation man accused of shooting at RCMP officers. The 15 new charges, including attempted murder and discharging a firearm at police, stem from an April 15th incident at a home at Kingsclear, some 20 kilometers west of Fredericton. That's where 34-year-old Michael Christopher Sabatis allegedly barricaded himself and fired dozens of gunshots at police through the home's windows. 7 RCMP vehicles were hit. Police did not return fire. One RCMP emergency response member was struck in the head by a bullet, but escaped injury thanks to a ballistic helmet. Tear gas was then deployed, forcing Sabatis and a 50-year-old woman out of the house. Both were arrested. The woman later released without charges. Sabatis is now scheduled to appear in court July 25th to face the new charges. A former senior RCMP officer with F Division in Saskatchewan was recently honored in L'Orange by some First Nations leaders, a group calling for the reinstatement of Rhonda Blackmore. Once Assistant Commissioner of F Division, Blackmore was relieved in June following some anonymous complaints against her. Now the RCMP's Assistant Commissioner of Indigenous and Support Services, she received an honor song and star blanket from Prince Albert Grand Chief Brian Hardlot and Lac La Ronge Chief Tammy Cook-Searson. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations have praised Blackmore's strong leadership during the mass stabbings at James Smith Cree Nation and her work to grow the ranks of Indigenous officers. Now the FSIN wants the anonymous complaints against her investigated. For its part, the RCMP says it remains committed to accountability and community policing in First Nations. And finally, the alleged theft of $30,000 worth of cigarettes of police looking for 3 Fort McMurray residents. Allegedly taken from the Fort McMurray 468 First Nation in northern Alberta on the night of June 16th, the cigarettes were stolen from a sea can. Police say security video then led them to a suspected vehicle some 38 kilometers away in the town of Fort Mac, where they found several unopened cigarette packs inside. They later seized 449 packs of cigarettes, small amounts of cocaine and fentanyl, along with a pellet gun. Now arrest warrants have been issued for a 40-year-old man, a 28-year-old man, and a 28-year-old woman. All have been charged with break and enter, as well as failing to comply with probation orders. And that's your APTN News Brief for Thursday, July 10th. I'm Rick Harp.